everyone. Thanks for attending the webinar. Today we'll be talking about driving technical impact, a framework for BAs in open source specialist group. And we have our amazing experience, highly skilled within multiple projects, technical projects and open source projects to talk us through how we can utilize this framework as a BA within an open source project or technical projects we find ourselves. So we have Laura. Laura is from United States and she'll be talking us through this. Laura, you have the floor, please.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. As we were kind of waiting for people to join, I realized Silafet and I started talking about this in April. So it's been a long time coming and I'm grateful to be here. So today we are talking about the business analyst success framework. And so it is, specific to a BA process that I've worked with Silafet a bit to shape it for open source. So I have a lot of background in business analysis, not so much in open source. So I look forward to also learning with you today, hearing the challenges that you face on your open source work and initiatives, and then working through how we could potentially use this framework to address some of those. So just a little bit about me. I see a lot of new names, which I love, people I haven't connected with before. I have been running Bridging the Gap, my blog, training company, set of resources for nearly 17 years. It started with a blog to help people get started as business analysts and morphed into a training company where we now train business analysts in a lot of the foundational skills that we'll talk about today. I'm also the author of my latest new book. Is called The Value-Driven Business Analyst. It's pretty much hot off the shelves. It was released in July. And then How to Start a Business Analyst Career was released, I think about 10 years ago now, though it still is very timely in terms of the content being applicable in our current world. And the training I do is part of the Business Analyst Blueprint framework and the training program, which I'll speak briefly to that framework and how that relates to what we're talking about today. But really my mission is to empower business analysts to amplify their impact and thrive in their careers, whether or not they actually have the title of business analyst. So that might be my first question. I love to just kind of get a sense of where people are at. Do you consider yourself a business analyst, or are you in a different kind of role within open source? That would be great to share, because I don't think not everybody doing business analysis has the title or is even in the role, but all of us, I think, can benefit from the practices that we're going to talk about today. So if you are interested in sharing that in the chat, that would be great. So what are we actually going to talk about? We're going to talk about the key responsibilities of a business analyst and how this work adds value to an organization. We're going to go through some business analyst techniques and yeah. Did I get on mute somehow?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Is that the host? Do I need to repeat anything, or how far?
Yeah, so I'm not sure. You can just continue, Laura. It wasn't that long enough.
Okay. Sorry about that. Not sure what happened. Okay. So I'm seeing I'm a BA, and then you're muted. Okay, for the past minute. All right, great. And so we are going to talk a little bit about generative AI today. This is not at all an AI focused talk, but I feel like it's so prevalent today in today's world, we always have to be incorporating it. And so I've just intentionally incorporated it into any kind of talk or speech or training that I do at this point. So some ideas to simmer on in terms of how you might use these in your career. And to the point that I was making, I know not may be business analysts. One of my mantras is that on every successful project, you will find a business analyst. They may not have the title, but somebody is doing this work. Somebody is figuring out why we're doing what we're doing, what we're doing and making sure everybody is on the same page, collaborating with both business and technical stakeholders to create a shared understanding. And notice I said successful, right? We, of course, have seen many projects that are not successful and maybe where we don't have that kind of shared understanding or that clear vision of why we're doing what we're doing. And then those are often projects where business analysis is not being done by a business analyst or by someone else. So Niall says I'm writing open source software for the business. All right, awesome. So I love to talk to software developers about business analysis. Cam's doing a BA AI transformation and apprenticeship. First year doing some training, great. Did study some business management, great. Okay, so great mix of backgrounds and experiences. So before we dive into the framework, I want to just take a moment and speak to like the big picture of how we actually create value as business analysts and what the value of business analysis is. So some of the things that I see is we reduce rework by ensuring all the requirements are captured, right? And this minimizes last minute changes, delays, rework, uh, kind of redundant effort. We solve the underlying business problem. So we go after what's really the root cause of what's stopping us as an organization and how do we solve that? Not always with software, though obviously if you're coding in open source, you're looking for the software opportunities, but we can also look at other types of solutions as well. A value-driven business analyst would thrive in a fast-paced environment by choosing the right techniques at the right times. So I never like to advise that somebody does all the things that they ever learned in some super comprehensive training program. Often our organizations need us to pick and choose from that set of techniques to make sure that we're delivering value as quickly as possible and helping build momentum. They cultivate credibility with a flexible but structured approach so they can make the biggest possible impact. They manage expectations and proactively engage stakeholders. And then finally, they work strategically and intentionally to build momentum, to move things forward while minimizing risk, right? So, in essence, this ability to choose the right techniques at the right time and do the analysis that's needed to make the next decision is a big part of what separates what I would consider kind of a basic mediocre business analyst from a great one. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the things that you find are really supportive of you in your career? Some of the values that you create as a business analyst? Because I know that there are also challenges, right? So you might see this list of opportunities and be like, yeah, but I can't do that because, and those are the kinds of things I would love to talk about today, like the challenges, the things that are kind of stopping us from doing this kind of work. And if you are a more experienced BA, I'd be listening in for kind of the tips that you could take to kind of tweak what you're doing. And if you are newer, this can help you understand what the role could look like in a real world scenario and what might be expected of you. And you can also use it to identify experiences that you may have had doing business analysis, even in another role as well. Okay, let's see. Another software development, BA. All right. All right. Great. Um, so Mazama says, I feel like no one sees your vision besides you, so taking discouraging advice is not good. Yeah, so we can talk about that for sure, how to involve people in the vision. And that's actually a great segue into what I wanted to share next before we get into the framework specifically, which is this manifesto. I authored this when I first started Bridging the Gap almost 17 years ago, and it has landed with a lot of business analysts out there. Out of chaos, we create order. Out of disagreement, we create alignment. Out of ambiguity, we create clarity, but most of all, we create positive change for the organizations we serve. So we're going to go through a lot of bits and details of this framework and kind of put a lot of structure in place. But at a high level, this is what we're trying, this is the vision of what business analysis does and what it provides to your organization. All right, so let's look. Thank you, Maz. All right, I appreciate that. Okay. So let's look at the framework as a whole. And again, we'll be diving into each of these steps, but I just wanted to give you the big picture before we dive into the details. So we start, and this framework is specific to a software initiative, some sort of a change. It is also designed to be flexible based on, we've had people in dozens of countries use it, different industries, different types of applications, and different types of methodologies, whether it's iterative or agile. And so like there's a lot of ways to tweak this, but through the lens of like, what as a BA should I be doing on a software project to help make it successful? So we start at the very beginning of getting oriented, learning enough to make an impact, to to understand what our role is going to be, and understand the current state. And then we look at the business objectives. This is where we ensure the right problem is being solved. We essentially answer the question, why are we doing this? This is the vision. So to Maz, who talked about, like, I feel like I need to sell my vision, this is where we actually take the opportunity to understand what are the stakeholders, what's their vision, what's their driver, and what's important to them, and gain some alignment around that, right? Next is defining scope. So in order to achieve those objectives, what is the scope of the solution? And that could include business process aspects as well as software aspects. And we want to involve the business and the technology team into understanding the high level view of what is in and out of scope for this particular initiative. From there, we would create our plan as a business analyst. This isn't the entire project plan. That would be the project manager with the whole team creating that. But for the BA work, what are the deliverables that we need to create? Who are the stakeholders that we need involved? What are our timelines look like? And again, just for the business analysis work. And we'll talk about what that looks like when we get to step 4. And then we move into what a lot of people think of as business analysis, particularly when they come from a very software focus, which is defining the detailed requirements. So do all, this is the point where you're discovering, analyzing, validating, like at a detailed level, what does the software need to do in order to meet the business objectives? And this is usually where the most effort goes into from a business analysis perspective, but it is so much easier when we have the rest of the work done already and kind of know where we're headed. Without that, we often end up in loops where we're like, well, there's a conflict between this person and this person. And it's usually because they have a different set of objectives of what they'd actually like to accomplish. And that creates that requirements churn. Where we're kind of reworking the same requirement over and over again because we were never on the same page about kind of what problem we're trying to solve in the first place. Then from there, we go to supporting the technical implementation. This is where you would be collaborating with your technical stakeholders to ensure that what they're building actually meets those business objectives. And similar on the business side, how does the business need to use that solution to ultimately deliver the intended result? And then finally, we take a step back and like, now that we've done all this, built all the stuff, what value have we created? We assess the value that we've actually created. What's the positive impact? Even if we didn't achieve all of our original objectives, we can still tell a story of our positive impact. So be really curious to hear, because this is really my first time speaking to the open source community, like what comes up for you in terms of what feels the most relevant and what feels maybe the least relevant? Is there anything that feels like, oh yeah, we've got that really in place, or this piece is going to be different because we're open source? And I know it's kind of a big question. Are we allowed, Silva, are people able to come off mute if they prefer to answer that really quickly? Or
Could you just elaborate that again?
the question was, what is there anything here that feels like it would be different because I'm on an open source environment, or this would or wouldn't apply? Yeah.
So going through the messages, I think I've got some. So Neil said, I'm writing open source software for business. So if Neil can give us an insight of what has been his experience, the yeah, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that's different about open source is that quite often you've got open source projects that cater for a variety of business customers with different business objectives. And so
Yeah.
there's a kind of tension there. So steps, yeah,
I think
five,
it'd be
six.
like on the target market, you just know your audience, and it's how you like sell it basically when you pitch it to them. I
So
think when
you're
you formulate the
building
plan.
to try to sell it. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying, Maz? Yeah.
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 It's definitely finding the right customers and avoiding the wrong applications which don't really
Hmm.
fit.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so having the right size niche.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. And Maz, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much like it's like when you it's because I used to work in sales, so I'm kind of seeing this as like a hook, or like where you build it up. So you start off with your opening, then you got your middle bit with the interesting part of the pitch, and then you give them the bare terms and conditions, and then you give them that assumptive close, and you hook them in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and I started my career as well in like a product. We were building an online product, and so my main stakeholder was a product manager, right? And
Uh,
there was sort of always the assumption that this was going to define a problem or solve a problem for our customer, but we really relied on their filter. So we didn't do a lot of those early steps either, but then often we would build solutions and they would miss the mark. Right. And
yeah,
then, so like that business objective could be, your customer journey, your understanding of like what are your
yes,
customers' pain points. It doesn't necessarily have to be internal to your business either. Okay.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the looking at the framework, so the for me the key part of it is the defining the business objective and the scope. So
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the project you are currently handling, be it technical, be it functional, be it user requirements. So if you are able to, as a BA, if you have the skills to able to identify the business objective, what is the business driver, why is
Mm-hmm.
this project in place, why are we going down the drain for this, like this particular project. If you're able to pinpoint that this is the specific business objective and as well as the scope. So again, I see a lot of people not able to identify the scope. We see a lot of project managers, solution architects, developers, you know they struggle a lot to understand what the scope are. So this
Yeah.
framework is very key, is one thing that as a BA or anybody that works on a project, be it open source project, be it technical project, ability for you to identify the scope would save you time, save the business cost, and it will help you to deliver the right solution.
Yeah, thank you for that because that's what happens when you don't have it is you end up with a lot of
Yeah, you
terms.
just
Yeah.
we
The
exactly
swirl, right?
just keep
Yeah.
reinventing the wheel. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you all for that input. I'll try to like keep that in mind as we go through this as well. Okay. All right. So step one, just to go into a bit more granularity on each of these steps, and kind of what's included. So step one, there's really four aspects that I think about getting oriented. So in the value here is again clarifying where you're headed before you start moving so that you can build momentum for later. A big one is clarifying your role. So your role, like even within, the title of business analyst, I've done so many different things. Like on a product, it was focused more on the software. On a business improvement, I was focused more on the business process, right? So just understanding like when you're in a new organization or new environment or new team, your role can be very different. And so taking some time to clarify your role and how that role intersects with the other roles on the team. Understanding the project history, I would imagine even in open source, like maybe somebody's tried to build this before, maybe a company's tried to do this before and it's worked or it hasn't worked. What are the existing systems and processes that we have in place? And then the primary stakeholders. So Maz, to your point, if you have a very diverse stakeholder group, that is necessarily going to be a more complex project and what actually needs business analysis more, because you should be identifying them ideally up front and starting to build those relationships and include them as we go through the process. So like you need somebody to manage all of that input and filter it into what actually makes sense for whatever it is that you're building. And then step 2 is, the objectives that Silifet was talking about. And I want to clarify here, because people often will see this and be like, well, we do this or we don't do this, but they can be called a lot of different things. So some people call them business requirements, business needs, desired outcomes, the ROI, the KPIs, right? So those would all be different ways of essentially saying, why are we investing in this? What is the result that we expect to achieve? And so when you're talking with those initial stakeholders, even if they're diverse in different organizations, even understanding how they're going to be thinking about what success looks like is important. And it can also go in a variety of different deliverables. So I'm going to show a scope statement here in a few minutes for step 3, but a lot of BAs include them in a business case, a project charter. They could be in an epic, in an agile environment. So they could be in any sort of document or deliverable that people are paying attention to towards the beginning of a project. And if you don't have a place where business objectives are, often using whatever the existing deliverables are and just adding a section for business objectives is the easiest place to like make an impact with this, as opposed to trying to start a whole nother document or deliverable. Just looking at what deliverables are already being used towards the beginning and adding that section in to bring visibility to those throughout the course of the project. So in terms of what they might look like, and this is an example that Silifat shared from her open source experience around a patient portal. So what we're looking for is between 2 and 5, typically, objectives that are actionable and clear and that fit together logically. So you can see how they support one another and would guide you towards meaningful solution options. A lot of times they're either too high level, like increase sales, right? Or too low level, as in implement patient portal, right? Which would be more of the scope. So here we have some, and I just kind of came up with some of potential ones, but reducing the time that a medical administrator spends booking patient services and increasing the number of services booked by patients. And he also mentioned that a lot of times these projects are designed to provide opportunities for new and aspiring BAs to build experience. So you could include that as an objective of the project as well. And this is a place where you can use generative AI, describe your project and ask for ideas. Because often, one way to get these is to just ask those stakeholders, but often they're like, I don't know, I just want a patient portal. Can you just make that happen for me? Like, I don't know, like, or that's what's important, right? The important part to me is the solution. And they just don't have the sense of why it's important. But when you propose this, then here's some things that or some business objectives that could be relevant. Often then they'll be like, well, that's close, but what's really important is not so much the time they spend, but maybe like where they spend the time, or that they're not on the phone anymore. Like that would be a slightly different objective, is less phone time, more email time would be different for a portal than just reducing the overall time. Right. So you can get feedback by presenting some ideas and then using those to get a response. When you are working on an internal process, or even when you're working on an external process, I do find like a process flow diagram is a great way to help also identify unclear objectives, or identify clear objectives from when there's not a lot of clarity. So in this case, this is a simple process diagram. It's for a procurement request process, and the goal was to add in some sustainability criteria, so that we're using sustainability criteria when we're choosing suppliers. But you could look at a process and say, like, what's broken, what's not working. And you could do the same thing for a customer, of like, look at the customer's process as it intersects with your product, and what's broken in that process, or where can you add an efficiency, or where can you create more value, what's not working in their process, and how can your tool or application, or what you're hoping to build, support that. Okay. Okay. Steven says, I often find that people who think they are the primary stakeholders, the managers, have little idea of what's actually needed. And that's where, often at this high level, we are engaging more of the manager director level or maybe the sponsor. But as we get into the pieces, we really do need to be talking to the people actually doing the work. So if they're and if those people aren't clear, like that's where the process analysis can help validate. So, asking for the business objectives, but then going and digging into the current state process and then marrying those together. So here's what we're seeing in our current state, here's the objective, and then kind of bringing those together to create some alignment can create a lot of momentum early on, even though it feels a little bit slower in the beginning to be stuck at this like step 2 at the very beginning. Okay. So the next step is around defining scope. And here the goal of this step is really to make sure that the business needs are tangible in such a way that multiple project team participants can envision their contribution to the implementation, to the project. And a big piece of it is defining the solution approach. And so this is where you would determine how much of the solution is technology and how much might be business process or sales or marketing. Right? Even in a product organization, we might be trying to sell more of our products, but we can have marketing initiatives to sell what we already have versus new features. Right? There's different ways of define of building towards that solution. And we definitely want to consider both. You might also be assuming here in an open source environment, there's a certain type of code, or that we would be including certain open source components in our software, or that we're building it to contribute back to the open source community, right? Those would all be part of your solution approach. And then you would take and draft a scope statement, or again, include some pieces of scope in a document that already exists. And I'm going to stop sharing slides in just a minute and show you our scope statement for Bridging the Gap, as well as how to use AI to generate a draft scope statement. But a key piece is also like, once we've identified what we might want to do, then what's the priority of each of these? What's high, medium, low, or 1, 2, 3, or ranked product backlog if we're using more of a product backlog approach. So some sense of priority so that we can get validated of what's in and out and what's actually feasible with the budget and the constraints. And then we want to look at the overall business case as well. All right, so real quick here, I just want to show, I'm going to share a different screen and share, because I often get the question, well, what does this like scope look like, right? And this is a free download. It's available at the URL that was on that slide through Bridging the Gap. And what's different about, templates are templates, but this has a lot of annotations and examples in it. So all of this blue text is not text that would be part of the template. It would be an annotation or instruction of how to use the template. So here we've got our overview, expected benefits, another way to say business objectives, the list of capabilities. This is where we would get into the features or high level functions of the software, assumptions, constraints, out of scope items, visual models, which I'll show you an example of in a minute, and open issues. And this might be, I'm assuming that people are probably more adept at AI than the last time I gave this presentation, but I still tend to get a bit of like aha moments. Who here is using AI regularly as a VA? Yes or no?
Yes.
Is that a giggle? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Not at all.
In
All right. We
confidence,
got
in
yes and
confidence.
a not at all. So you're all good. I have to teach with it. Okay. So as I shared, this is something when I was experimenting that I figured out really worked much better than a lot, like asking AI to generate something. So what I've done here as an example, so I took that template that I just showed you that had all of that instructional text. And so just as a way of prompting, so this is like a brief description of the project that Silifit gave me in our open source community, is building a system with the goal of reducing patient time or the time they spend scheduling a service. So then the key part is I've uploaded the scope statement. This is the template we use. Can you create a draft using the instructions as guidance for the patient scheduling application? And then can you please include questions that I should be thinking about as well to think through the full impact of this event on our business? And then it created something that I feel like is way better. I don't love that it created emojis for it, but way better than, just can you create a scope statement for me, right? Or can you write a use case for me? So just the general piece of prompting advice, if you're somewhat new to this, where can you use an instructional template to train AI, just like you would train a more junior business analyst or an apprentice, and ways to do that. So, we've got again, this is a great way, potential expected benefits, some questions to consider, our business requirements and outcomes, our capability set, our system context diagram, actually providing different systems, even though it didn't put together this visually, and our assumptions and constraints, right? So again, this wouldn't be the document that is done. It would be a document you might want to review with stakeholders or review yourself first and use as a guide to start asking questions, but you have a working draft versus starting from scratch. And so to me, that's one of the best ways to use AI at this point. And there's a lot of new things that are coming up as well. Okay, let me go back to my slides here. Yes. All right, we're back on the slides. I did want to show you that one of my favorite diagrams to do as part of scoping is a system context diagram. So it's a really simple model. Essentially what you have here is right in the middle is the portal. Oop, I tried to circle it and it the portal, and then you've got all the systems that would interact with it. So in the case of the scheduling system, we'd have the patient's calendar, we'd have the medical system calendar, we might have a data store for the patient system, right? And so what else? So all those things would need to interact. And I would imagine if you're building a set of code for open source, like you would need to take into account other either other systems or a flexibility in terms of how those systems might integrate with the function that you're building. And so to me, this is the piece where you start to find the complexity and the impact of a new feature, as well as really identifying what's in and out of scope when it comes to integrations, which can often create a lot of headaches later on in the process. Okay. So step 4 is your business analysis plan, and people either love planning or hate planning. And so this is where I get a lot of resistance of like, I don't have time to plan, but also like business analysis is hard to plan because there's so many unknowns, and that is 100% true. But the goal here is to create something that you can use as a touchstone to guide you. Right. So when we're talking about our plan, we're talking about the types of deliverables. So are we doing user stories or use cases or business processes or data models? And then the actual specific deliverables that we're going to create. So if we're doing user stories, what are all the user stories, or what are all the wireframes, or what are all the use cases? So it could be like book appointment, approve appointment, cancel appointment, right? Those would be examples of deliverables. But the key piece that I think is so critical in terms of the plan is the stakeholder involvement. So when you start to identify, in order to write this use case or in order to map out this process, I need these 2, 3, 4, 5 people involved, right? And that timeline looks like this. Then you start to set those expectations of people being involved at the right time. And a lot of projects get stalled because of lack of engagement, and then that gets blamed on the BA as the person who is not meeting deadlines. But it is a collaborative effort. So this is where your chance to say, these are the people I need involved, when and for what kinds of activities, in order to be successful, versus kind of hoping that they're successful. And I've gotten caught by this, where you think, oh yeah, I can finish this piece like at this time, and then somebody's on vacation for 2 weeks and they didn't tell you, right? So this is what starts to set those expectations up front. Oops, sorry. I'm scrolling the chat. Okay. Yeah, no plan survives the first contact with the enemy, and everyone is the enemy. Okay. All right. Yes. No, but the point is to put something out there, right? And to have something that you're working from. So this is what it might look like in reality, where you have all your deliverables listed. You would estimate your effort and your duration, and then you can use that to calculate start and end date. That's also a great use of AI if you have the estimated effort, duration, and very importantly, the amount of time you have to allocate to this work versus other work. AI can do a great job of calculating those dates for you. And what I have found is when I ask AI to calculate dates, then usually it's like, well, that's not going to work because, right? And that because is the assumption or the risk that I haven't clearly stated. So actually having AI create some of the dates also gives you the kind of the insight of, well, this isn't going to work because, and you can state some of those assumptions or state some of those constraints and make them really clear for your team versus assumed, and that makes things clearer for everyone. This is the step that everybody wants us to dive into right away, right? Of getting to the detailed requirements. So this goal here is that we have the detailed pieces of what needs to be done, or what needs to be built at whatever level of detail your implementation or technical or software development team would need to build those. But getting there is still including the stakeholders, doing the analysis, and also reviewing and validating so that it actually reflects what they need. And you would go through this for each and every deliverable on your business analysis plan, to get it through the cycle. And so this is a set of techniques that we teach at Bridging the Gap. So when we're talking about, well, what techniques would we use, right? So you can see here, we've got the framework we're talking about today underneath. And I've been talking a lot about the business and the software level. So business process, how does the business function, the software level, how does the software, like what does the software need to do? Not necessarily how does the software need to be built. And then also the information level, which we haven't talked a lot about, where the data modeling comes in. It's essential for systems integrations, migrating from one system to another, as well as any type of reporting project. Even also just a simple project where you might be adding a field to a screen, because why are you adding that field, right? Where does it go? Where does it get stored? How does it impact the business logic? What are we expecting it to do? A field on a screen is never just a field on a screen. And you still probably need to think about some of these things from an information and data modeling perspective when you do that, because everything is up for grabs at that point, like what all the flow. So I do find that when you look at things from these different perspectives, and again, whether that business level is your customer perspective or your internal business perspective, you get a fuller and richer view of the requirements so that when you actually go to build the code, it serves all those people. So I think, like, to that point that Maz made about, like, there's so many stakeholder groups. One of the ways I have managed that is to have I've called it usually like a product development council or some sort of group that has a representative from each of those different business units or stakeholder groups on it. And they are part of all of the discovery, analysis, and validation. And so you're continuously getting feedback from all of those groups on each of the types of features. And that has worked well as a solution to really gain alignment before you go to building the code. And then you're trying to tweak that code to customize to a lot of different groups. It makes this work a lot more challenging and a lot more time intensive. And so you want to obviously build that into your plan. Anytime you add more stakeholders, the planning or the work itself is going to get more complex and more time intensive. But it saves time in the long run of building, tweaking, reworking, kind of that squirrel that we were talking about. Also, some great ways to use Gen AI. You can create rough drafts, as we've seen. You can revise. I've used it to, like, can you make this update to this use case? And can you can you suggest improvements? The latest thing that I'm seeing BAs do, which I have not had a chance to play around with yet, but I'm like burning to do it, is actually, creating rapid prototypes in a meeting. So using some tools to hear what people are asking for and having AI generate a prototype that then you can use to say, is this what you're looking for? And really that speeds up that analysis and validation process. By not having to do that in between meetings, being able to do it in real time and get that real time kind of feedback. So I think that's kind of like the next thing that people are starting to experiment with AI. So that brings us back to the framework, and then we're going to go to step 6. And I do want to leave at least a few minutes, quite a bit of time for questions here at the end. So what I wanted to just say, looking at the big picture, is so far from a BA role perspective, there's been a lot of driving to get to step 5. And then after step 5, there's a bit of an energy shift. So where you're now more in a support role versus a driving role. Historically, this is when BAs like went on to the next project and said, good luck, here's the requirements. That's not a workable solution anymore. So, there's a lot of collaboration that we want to leave time for and invest in to make sure that all the work we've done so far gets realized in the real world. So from a step 6 perspective, this is where we're supporting the technical team. We might be reviewing designs, reviewing test plans and test cases, really investing a lot of time in answering questions. This is where I know Silhouette has mentioned GitHub, and I kind of saw some of the demos of how the code and the Q&A is all kind of embedded. So you would be in there answering questions, maybe even reviewing code if that's your area of competency. To make sure, but you're not doing it from a code review perspective, but does this solve the problem that we're trying to solve? Were the requirements understood? Is this what we need in the end? And similar from the business perspective. So when it goes time to actually help the business change, we would be doing future state process analysis. We might be training the business or training the trainer who's going to train the business in a larger scale situation, updating any assets. So what can you include with the code that will enable people to deploy it in their environment or use it or integrate with it? As you roll out that functionality, what assets would make it more usable? How can you encourage organizations to leverage what you've made available? How can you show it to them and describe it to them? Would be things to be thinking about in this stage. And Yael says some open source projects could benefit from business analysis plans and blueprints. Yeah, to help potential customers understand what the project can help with rather than technical. Yeah, I think that's like a big shift, right? Like, so when I think of open source, I think it's like you're already talking about the technology. Like you already made a decision of how you're going to solve a theoretical problem or that you're going to build some code. And so, yeah, taking the time to like look back at why are we doing what we're doing and what makes sense from a business perspective could make that code so much more usable and embraced, right? And that's essentially what I think all developers want, is to be able to see their code used in the real world. So this is part of what helps achieve that. Okay, and then finally, step 8, we look back at the big picture. What did we actually achieve, and being able to celebrate that, communicate that. Inside the book and our courses, I talk about the difference between qualitative and quantitative. So a lot of times organizations don't have quantitative metrics, meaning actual hard numbers of what the benefits are, or what like we saved X hours. We're not always able to measure that, but we can show in a process map what steps we eliminated or what steps we automated. We can show what new capabilities we enabled, right? And then that helps articulate the value. All right, and that is a big picture view of the framework. And I just want to leave you again with our mantra: on every successful project, you will find a business analyst, even if that's not their title. Which leaves us lots of time for questions. Yes, and engagement around the content.
Good job, Laura. That's good. Yeah, you've nailed it all. So let's go through the text if you've got any question for Laura or for
Yeah.
myself. You want to know what we do, open source, or you want to have more knowledge about how BA integrates in open source environments or any kind of technical environment. Here you go.
So I was gonna say, with the business analysis, it basically, because now it's like I've gone from a different journey to another journey, and it's like, right, I'm on this journey to now become a teacher, but I've come from a sales background, and I've attempted to have businesses in the past, but it's like, yeah, uh, what if I'd become what if in the future, like I start doing my own online coaching and stuff like that? Is that like part of that analysis once you get your QTS?
So you're talking about like doing the analysis to set up a coaching business?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
how would you go about that?
So I think how would you go about setting up a coaching business, or how would you go about like doing the analysis for it? Is that
Oh, that's I think I can do the analysis for it.
mm,
It's probably be like just I don't it's just one of those you've given me a food for thought basically.
yeah. Yeah, I will just share from my early experience, what was most helpful for me in terms of setting up a coaching or training, what became a training business and what didn't start
Yeah.
out that way was like in collaboration connection with people who I could help. So, back 17 years ago, that meant writing a blog article, publishing that, and being in the comments. Now it's like LinkedIn and DMs and presentations like this.
I've just added you on LinkedIn, by the way.
Okay, great. But to be, and I had spent so much time actually building this whole consulting methodology for this kind of work that I wanted to do, but then
Yeah.
nobody really wanted that bit. So really when I got out of the analysis and into that early, and it's really step 1 and 2, like we talked about, who are the
Yeah.
stakeholders? What do they want? How can I provide that? And kind of in that conversation, things moved a lot more quickly.
It's like when you ask the customer questions, basically when you're investigating
Yeah.
so I used to sell broadband basically, and I was the best at it. I mean, I
Yeah.
broke records for Vodafone, but it was always like, always asking them like what they're currently spending, or like what they basically, when you're building a report, you just want to investigate, and then how you can solve, or what you can offer them, what product to offer them, or what package to offer them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and also even what might they need that they don't know they need, right? So, or what kind of like that market research part is really important.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So because they were like, right, I already got broadband, so why do I need yours? Kind of miss sales now.
Yeah. Well, it'll
Yeah,
serve you well in coaching.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a teacher.
so yeah, I think Minty, do you have a question? Okay, I think Minty mentioned that she's I don't know, he or she is currently working in any no on a project within NHS. Oh, Neil, go
Oh,
ahead, please.
yeah, go on. I'll let you go.
I'll let Minty go first.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Liam. Yeah, so I work in the NHS. I'm a project manager. I work very closely with BAs. But one of the projects that's actually coming up is a patient portal, so this is quite useful for me.
And
So
thanks,
yeah,
Silifat, for that. That was her
yeah, that's
idea.
quite
Yeah.
useful. Yeah, so that's kind of gave me a bit of food for thought. The biggest challenge we have it's not a challenge. The biggest way we work within the NHS is that we really rely on the subject matter experts in the field.
Mm.
So we rely on the BAs really rely on the stakeholders who will be in the SME to provide us with the future state process and the current state process as well, obviously. It's just finding that it's not a question, it's more of a query or a challenge, is to get that gap between the analysis between the current state and the future state process map with the limitations of the technology available. Because we outsource to third-party suppliers, we bring in products, and how that actually fits in with the environment that we're actually working across. Looking back at the patient portal stuff, for one of the things, what things can be advanced on, going back to the patient portal, is for the future things, is to add on the patient experience forms and stuff like that. So you interact with the patients after what their experience is and things like that. So yeah, it's just finding that gap between the technology, what's available, or the limitations of the project, and what the expectations is as well. So it's not a question, it's just more of a bit of feedback, I suppose. And
yeah, do they come to you then with their desired future state and ask you to build it?
no, they don't know. No,
they don't know. Yeah.
no.
Oh,
Yeah.
that
So they
makes sense.
come, do they come even with their current state?
Yeah, they're coming with the current state. So we work, well, the BAs work with the SMEs to design the current state process map. And then it's just finding that gap between the current and the future state process. That's where we find it quite challenging with the consultants and the SMEs.
Right. So yeah, and so part of that is usually it's like the business objectives piece that's missing.
Yeah,
Right. So we want to look at the current state and then what are the challenges and what are we actually trying to achieve and why? Like how does this fit with our, or you know, if you want to even go bigger, how does this fit with our organizational goals or strategy for the year? And then bring it down to, well, what can we solve for within the constraints of this project?
sure. So
Yeah, but and you
analysis.
are like in that phase, it's really fuzzy because you're like, well, we've got this tool that could do this and this tool that could do this. And you know, you want to bring tech feedback into what's possible and business feedback into what would help them. And it's
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So it's hard. Are you doing that with outside consultants that don't understand the process? Yeah.
No, not outside, it's all internal. So would that be pretty much like a gap analysis to be done?
Once you know, I mean, the gap analysis is once you have the current and future state. So yeah, I think it sounds to me like, do you have a clear, what problem are we solving for?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. Okay.
We do. Yeah.
Yeah. So then where's it getting stuck?
So we haven't started the project on the patient portal, so this is quite a good one for me. So I'm just trying to find out from you what I need to look out for. So you've actually
Okay.
covered it off in the presentation kind of thing. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to think what.
Yeah. So if you have current state processes, I would look at like putting together that scope statement. What are our business
scope
objectives?
statement.
What's our like what's going to be in and out of scope for this portal?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant.
And what are both the business changes that are going to happen and the software components that are going to be built? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's also more like defining the impacts of the project. So this is the project. What is the impact to the business?
Yeah.
Right. So if you're able to identify the problem, so this project, how is it going to help this problem? Right. So
Sure.
if you have that granular knowledge of how this project is going to help the problem, so it could be in form of a technical implementation, it could be in form of a functional implementation. So those things you need to list them out, and it gives a clearer decision of, okay, this is what you're going to do. Can now create a robust recommendation to the stakeholders that this is what it is, this is what we need to do, this is how long it will take, and all that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Means okay, that's a nail. Yeah.
Yeah, this is more an observation. Thanks, Laura. I mean, I think it's a lot of people in the open source space are kind of quite techie. I probably put myself in that group now that I
Yeah.
sort of don't work in business anymore. And they're really interested, maybe obsessed too much with the right way to the best way to technically achieve something. But as you said, we also would like people to use the stuff that we're doing in whatever way is appropriate. And so thinking about doing the kind of business analysis of sort of working out what are the kind of problems we're trying to solve, preferably with some actual customers, so, some pilot projects and things is really important. And I think that's sort of just missing from a lot of projects that are complicated enough that it's not easy to really figure out what it is they're trying to achieve. So
and it's hard if they're not accessible. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
often you go to look at, even if you're quite technical, you go to look at a project and it's hard to really figure out what it's really going to do, and what its what are its strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, there's definitely something I'll try and factor into my thinking.
Awesome. And I just want to say we also need people who really care about how to create the best possible code.
Oh yeah,
Right?
I'm not
Like
saying that that's a
is
bad
like
thing,
totally not
but
my
yeah, but we
Yeah.
could have we could have lots of fantastic code, but no one really knows where to
Yeah.
find it and how to use it, and
Yeah.
or they use it for the wrong things.
Yeah. So maybe that's where we engage more of the BA community in the open source community as well. I think there can be some really great opportunities there.
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
Thank you. Do we have any other? Okay. Yeah. So Peter Brown, I think he was curious to know what the webinar is all about. So I hope you've had time to look into, gain one or two things, Peter, of what
Yeah,
they
it's
have to
been
say.
very useful to listen to everything here. So I'm very new to sort of the BA space, but I'm thinking if I come back to computing, because I used to be a developer consultant, then got away from that because I think kind of AI pushed me away in a way. If I do come back to the computing space, a BA is probably most likely something that I'd be interested in doing, because I think I can do the technical documentation for a start, and I think that lends well to that part of the role, I think.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, definitely. Like there's BAs come from both sides. So we've got some with a very good technical background and then more of a business background. And there's challenges both ways. So technical people often need to learn the stuff that we've been talking about a lot today. And business people tend to need to understand what is actually doable in code and how it works and get to more granular level than they're used to.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks. And I
Yeah.
saw somebody asked where to buy the book. I added that link in the chat as well.
Yeah, Laura, are you able to display the last slide, please?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, so yeah, so I think yeah, thank you, Laura, again. Thank you for every the insights to the BA technical, bridging the gap exactly between the BA and the technical world. Yeah, if you like to join BCS, you're a member or you're not a member, so these are the emails that you can send emails to. You also have that opportunity to receive insights to our new webinars. We have this kind of webinars every month, different topics, open source, technical, business, anything that would give you enhance your expertise, your professional, be it young or be a professional within the tech experts. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you everyone, and have a good evening.